It always takes exactly 3 seconds for your world to collapse. I counted. 1. The conference room door bursts open. 2. 12 heads twist toward our CEO's flushed face. 3. His finger stabs directly at me as he delivers the words I'll never erase. It's always the quiet ones. My cheeks blazed as every coworker at that table turned to glare. 24 eyes drilling into me like needles. Expressions shifting from warm to suspicious in an instant. That's when I realized being good at your job means nothing when someone powerful needs a fall person. I'm Margot Levine, 33. And before I continue with what unfolded that day at Helix Dynamics, please like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I still can't believe I'm revealing this story, but each time I share it, I feel a little more of the weight loosen from my chest. 4 years at the company. 4 years of arriving first and clocking out last. 4 years of thank you, Margot. And how would we manage without you, Margot? And in 3 seconds, I turned into the office outcast. Our CEO, Richard Blackwell. Everyone called him Rick except me, because I couldn't tolerate the fake familiarity. Stood at the front of the conference table that Thursday morning, veins pulsing along his temples. Behind him, a projection screen showed a spreadsheet with a blaring red figure. 2,367,512. Someone in this room is robbing my company, he said, his voice dipping into that lethal calm that powerful men use right before they ruin someone. We have a discrepancy of over $2 million, and I want answers. Now, the 12 of us sat immobile. There was Devin from marketing with his perpetually loosened tie, Amara from client relations who had just returned from maternity leave, Terrence, our tech guy who barely spoke but fixed everything, Lucia, our office manager who knew everyone's secrets, and the rest, all of us part of the special projects unit that handled our most sensitive client accounts. You should know that I was the financial compliance specialist, the one responsible for ensuring every dollar was tracked, every transaction legitimate. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Financial discrepancies had been happening for 8 months. Richard pressed on, pacing now. Sophisticated, nearly invisible, but my external auditors caught the pattern. My stomach nodded. 8 months ago was exactly when Richard had personally shifted me to this team, saying he needed someone with your precision. Now I saw why. He slammed a folder onto the table. $2.3 million funneled through dozens of microtransactions, all approved within this room, his eyes drilling into mine, by someone who assumed they were smarter than me. I felt a bead of sweat creep down my spine as he closed in on my chair. Margot here is our numbers person. Always quiet, always observing, always documenting. He practically spat that last word. It's always the quiet ones who assume they won't get caught. My mouth opened, but only silence emerged. I had spent my entire life being the dependable one, the meticulous one, the one who triple verified her work. Now here I was being painted as a criminal in front of the colleagues I'd exhausted myself to support. "Sir," I finally whispered, my voice humiliatingly small. "There must be some mix-up." His laugh was icy. "Oh, I don't make mistakes, Miss Levine. But apparently you do. I've already contacted the authorities. They'll arrive within the hour." The room tilted. Police. This couldn't be real. "Check her computer," someone muttered. Dominic, our team lead, who had always seemed to resent how closely I worked with Richard. "Already done," Richard said. "Found plenty." That's when I understood they'd orchestrated this. This wasn't a revelation, it was an execution. You know that moment when fear shifts into something different? When your body floods with a strange calm because you've hit the lowest point, and suddenly everything becomes crystal clear. That's where I stood. My hands stopped trembling as I reached for my phone. "Sir," I said, my voice steadier than I ever expected. "You might want to look at this." Richard smirked. "A confession? How considerate. Not quite. I opened the secure folder I'd been maintaining for 10 months, long before I'd even joined this team. I handed him my phone, screen showing a video. His expression changed as he watched. Confusion, then shock, then something that resembled fear. You see, 10 months earlier, I'd noticed something strange in our company transaction logs. Tiny inconsistencies. Nothing dramatic, but patterns that didn't add up. I'd taken my concerns to my old supervisor, who brushed me aside. So I began documenting everything. Screenshots, recordings of meetings, backups of altered files before and after the edits. Not because I suspected theft, but because I was tired of having my warnings ignored. When Richard transferred me to the special projects team, I kept documenting out of habit. Detailed, precise records of everything I handled, including the 6 separate times when Richard personally told me to adjust certain client billing records. Each time he justified it, fixing an accounting error, balancing something, client disputes. Each time I complied while quietly saving the untouched data. I didn't realize what I'd been chronicling until 3 weeks ago when the full pattern finally clicked. By then, I had 10 months of evidence showing exactly how 2.3 million vanished and exactly whose directives made it happen. You recorded our private meetings? Richard whispered, his face drained. One-party consent state, I answered. And I have far more than recordings. The room was deathly still. Everyone witnessing this power shift, this unthinkable reversal. These are confidential business matters, he said, voice sharpening. You've violated company policy. Fascinating. That's your priority right now, I replied, feeling strength I didn't know I possessed. Not the fraudulent transactions or the fact that you nearly had me arrested for your scheme. He straightened his tie, switching strategies. Everyone out except Margot. No one budged. Now, he barked. Dominic rose first. I think we should remain. His eyes met mine with something unfamiliar. Respect, maybe. Or simply the humanity that comes from watching someone nearly destroyed. Richard's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and went pale. This meeting is finished. We'll handle this privately, Margot. No, I said, surprising even myself. We won't. For years, I'd been the office doormat, the dependable one who stayed late, fixed everyone's mistakes, and never voiced a complaint. The one whose weekends were always negotiable, the quiet one. Everything in that folder is already backed up in 3 secure places, I continued, including my lawyer's office. You have 20 minutes until the real authorities arrive, the ones I called this morning. Richard's face contorted with fury. You stupid! Don't! Lucia cut in sharply. She has enough to bury you already. The next 20 minutes passed in a haze. Richard locked himself inside his office. Security showed up. Employees murmured in corners. I sat alone at the conference table, trembling so badly I had to grip the armrests. I'd lived my entire life by the rules. Never jaywalked. Filed taxes ahead of time. Saved every receipt for office supplies. And somehow, I'd ended up here, forced to choose between going to prison for someone else's corruption or fighting back against the most powerful man I knew. When the FBI agents walked in, yes, actual FBI, turns out Richard's creative accounting crossed state lines. I handed them my phone and 10 months of painstakingly organized evidence. You've been documenting this for how long? Asked the female agent, scrolling through my files with raised brows. Since I first realized something was off, I said. No one would take me seriously. She looked at me with something like sympathy. They're listening now. As they escorted Richard out, no handcuffs, just a humiliating walk through the office he'd ruled like a throne, he locked eyes with me one final time. You'll regret this, he murmured, low enough for only me to hear. No one hires a whistleblower. Maybe he was right. Maybe I'd just set my career on fire to save myself. But as I watched him leave, I understood I'd spent my whole professional life being scared, of disappointing others, of not being perfect, of speaking up, of drawing attention. I was exhausted from being afraid. The company collapsed over the following weeks. Auditors flooded our offices. The board of directors held emergency meetings. Several executives abruptly resigned for personal reasons. The Special Projects Division was dissolved. All of us were placed on paid leave while they untangled the disaster. 3 weeks after that meeting, I sat alone in my apartment, surrounded by job postings I couldn't bring myself to apply for. Richard's warning echoed in my mind. No one will hire a whistleblower. I'd saved myself from prison. But at what price? My phone rang. Amara from the team. Have you heard? She asked immediately. Heard what? The board fired 4 more executives this morning. They're claiming ignorance of Richard's scheme. But guess what investigators uncovered? Emails. Dozens. I closed my eyes. So everyone knew. Not everyone, she said, but enough to make this a far bigger scandal than just Richard. I should have felt justified. Instead, I felt drained. There's something else, Amara added. The board is searching for internal candidates to help rebuild. People they trust. A pause. They asked specifically about you, Margot. My laugh sounded empty. Me? The whistleblower? The one with integrity, she corrected. The person who did the right thing at tremendous personal risk. I had no idea how to respond. For years I'd been invisible, valued for my work but never viewed as leadership material. Too quiet, too cautious. That was me. They want to meet tomorrow, Amara said. Just think about it. After we hung up, I sat perfectly still, staring at the wall. This wasn't the vindication I'd imagined. It wasn't a clean triumph or a flawless revenge. It was messy and tangled and terrifying. But maybe that's what real justice looks like. Not a thunderbolt, but a slow rebuild from the wreckage. The next morning, I put on my sharpest professional outfit, the one I saved for high-stakes meetings. As I walked into corporate headquarters, past security guards who nodded at me with newfound respect, past employees who whispered as I moved by, I understood something deeply. Richard had been right about one thing. It is always the quiet ones. Because we're watching, we're noticing, we're recording, and when pushed too far, we finally speak. The boardroom felt different from the other side of the table. Sunlight poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating 7 faces that had never given me a second thought before. Now they studied me with careful interest as I took the seat across from Diane Mercer, the board's chairwoman. Miss Levine, she began, her voice crisp and professional. I want to begin by acknowledging your courage. What you did prevented this company from far worse consequences. The words sounded practiced, something her crisis team probably crafted. I nodded once, but stayed silent. I'd learned silence unsettles powerful people. Let them fill it. We've completed a comprehensive investigation, said Lawrence Chen, the company's lead counsel. The fraud goes back 18 months and implicates 7 executives, including Richard. 4 have already resigned. 3 are fighting their termination. My throat tightened. 7 executives knew, enabled, or purposely ignored what was happening. Lawrence added, the 2.3 million. Richard accused your team of taking is only what we've confirmed so far. I thought of my former coworkers, 11 people who had been under suspicion, their reputations dragged through the mud. What happens to my team? Diane exchanged a look with the others. That's part of why we wanted to meet with you. We're restructuring the company. Several departments will merge, and we need people we can trust to help rebuild. Here it came. The job offer Amara hinted at. I steadied myself. We'd like you to head the new financial compliance division, Diane said. You'd report directly to the board with a significant salary increase and the authority to assemble your own team. My pulse quickened. This was beyond anything I had imagined. A director-level role, multiple levels above where I'd been before. The kind of position that would normally demand an MBA and a decade and a half of experience. The sort of role no one would have even imagined offering me a month ago. Why me? I asked, not fishing for praise, but honestly needing clarity. Diane's professionally polished expression slipped. Frankly, Miss Levine, we're dealing with a credibility issue. We require someone with unquestionable integrity. Someone who's already proven they'll choose what's right, even when it's painful. Translation: they needed my reputation to rescue theirs, my whistleblowing as a corporate shield. I'd become their ethics emblem, proof that the company had scrubbed itself clean. And if I say no? I asked. We'd completely understand, Lawrence replied smoothly. You'd receive a generous severance package, strong references, and an NDA, I assume. I cut in. The brief silence confirmed everything. They'd pay me to disappear quietly if that's what I wanted. I glanced around the table at these powerful people who suddenly required something from me. A month earlier, I would have accepted whatever they offered, thankful for any scrap of recognition, but that version of Margot died the day Richard tried to ruin her. I'd like to suggest another option, I said, startled by how steady my voice sounded. I'll consider the role, but I have conditions. The atmosphere shifted, brows lifting. This wasn't part of their script. We're open to discussion, Diane said warily. First, my whole team gets cleared publicly, a company-wide announcement stating they've been exonerated, plus bonuses for the ordeal they endured. Lawrence jotted notes. That seems fair. Second, I want to personally interview everyone in the finance department. Anyone who remains will report directly to me, and I need to trust them. More nods circled the room. Third, I want Richard's office. That froze them. Richard's corner office was usually reserved for senior executives. That's not typical for a director-level position, Martin from HR said, speaking for the first time. I held his gaze. Nothing about this situation is typical. Diane examined me for a long beat, then nodded. Anything else? I inhaled deeply. Yes. No NDA. I won't publicly criticize the company if you act in good faith, but I won't sign away my right to speak. The room's temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. That's extremely uncommon, Lawrence began. So is being falsely accused of embezzlement by your CEO, I replied. I never asked for any of this, but now that we're here, I need to be sure I'm stepping into something better, not just something new. Diane dismissed everyone except herself and Lawrence. For 45 minutes, we negotiated point by point. By the time I stepped out of that boardroom, I had every term in writing and something even more rare: respect. The following morning, when I walked into what used to be Richard's office, now mine, I felt a swirl of conflicting emotions. Triumph, absolutely, but also a sorrow for what it had cost to reach this point. I traced my fingers along the expensive desk where he once plotted my downfall and reflected on power, how it alters people, how it can warp them, how fiercely I never wanted it to twist me. A knock on the door broke my thoughts. Lucia stood holding a small plant. Office warming gift, she said, setting it on my desk. Hard to kill, even for people who forget to water things. Kind of like your career, apparently. I laughed. A real laugh for the first time in weeks. Have you heard from the others? I asked. Everyone's been called in for meetings today. Rumors about restructuring. About you? She hesitated, examining my expression. So it's true. You're running things now? A department, not the entire company, I clarified. And I'd like you to be my second in command. Her eyes widened. Me? I'm office management, not finance. You're organized, observant, and more importantly, You stood up for me that day when it would have been easier not to. I need people I can rely on. Over the next week, I met with each member of our old team, plus dozens more from finance and accounting. I brought in Terrence to build customized security systems for our new division, invited Amara to manage external communications. Even Dominic, who'd originally suggested checking my computer, showed enough remorse and capability to earn a spot. Only Devin declined my offer. "I'm sorry, Margot, but this place feels contaminated to me now," he said. "I've accepted a role elsewhere." I respected that. Not everyone is willing to rebuild from wreckage. The work was more demanding than anything I'd ever tackled. 16-hour days became routine. We uncovered even more financial discrepancies as we dug further. Richard's scheme had threaded itself through multiple corners of the company. Each finding brought a sense of vindication, but also reminded me how narrowly I'd avoided being sacrificed for all of it. 3 months into my new position, I received a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won? Enjoy it while you can." I recognized the sender instantly. My hands trembled as I showed the message to Lawrence. "We'll take care of this," he assured me. "Richard's being investigated by 3 different agencies. This will only make his situation worse." But that night, alone in my apartment, the fear wouldn't leave me. Richard had been influential and well-connected. What if he still had allies inside the company? What if this was only the start of his retaliation? I barely slept, jumping at every small noise. The next morning, I arrived at work with dark circles beneath my eyes, tensing when my phone buzzed with a new notification. It wasn't Richard this time, but a news alert. Former Helix Dynamics CEO Richard Blackwell arrested on multiple fraud counts. The article showed his mugshot, unshaven, hollow-eyed, nothing like the imposing figure who had once jabbed his finger at me in accusation. The FBI had uncovered evidence of similar schemes at his 2 prior companies. This wasn't his first fraud, just the first time he'd finally been caught. That evening, as I was leaving the office, I crossed paths with Diane in the elevator. "I assume you've seen the news?" she said. I nodded. "The prosecutors reached out. They want you to testify." My stomach twisted. The idea of facing Richard in court, of having to relive that humiliating confrontation, made me feel physically sick. "Do I have a choice?" I asked. "Legally, yes. Practically." She didn't finish the sentence. We both understood what she meant. If I refused to testify, it would undermine everything I'd fought to restore. The preliminary hearing was set for a Tuesday morning in early December. I spent the night before practicing my testimony with Lawrence, preparing for every possible angle. "Just tell the truth," he advised. "That's all you need to do." But stepping into that courtroom the next day felt like marching into battle. My carefully chosen outfit, a charcoal gray suit, nothing loud, felt like armor. My neatly organized folder of documents, a shield. And then Richard appeared, sitting beside his attorney, wearing a suit that sagged on his thinner frame. He'd lost weight. When he turned and spotted me, his expression snapped from empty to venomous so fast it made me recoil. I expected fear. Instead, I felt nothing. This man held no power over me anymore. When I took the stand, my voice stayed steady. I answered each question plainly, referencing my records when needed. I explained the transactions, the fraud pattern, how Richard had positioned me as the scapegoat. Richard's attorney tried to paint me as an ambitious employee who'd betrayed her boss to advance her own career. "Isn't it convenient that you're now in a director-level role after accusing Mr. Blackwell?" "There was nothing convenient about any of this," I replied. "I lost friends. I still suffer anxiety attacks. I checked my locks 3 times before bed, but I didn't have a choice. It was either speak up or go to prison for something I didn't do." When it was over, I walked past Richard without looking at him. Outside, reporters swarmed with cameras and microphones. "Miss Levine, How does it feel to take down your former boss? Will you stay at Helix Dynamics? Do you consider yourself a hero? I pushed through them without answering. This wasn't about heroism or revenge, it was about survival. 6 months after that first accusation, Richard pleaded guilty to multiple fraud charges. The details became public. He'd siphoned money to cover personal gambling debts, orchestrated complex cover-ups, and was preparing to flee the country when his scheme began to unravel. He received 8 years in federal prison. The company survived, though it had changed. We lost clients initially but gained new ones who valued our stronger transparency measures. The Levine I protocols, as they came to be known internally, set a new benchmark for financial compliance. My team, my real team, the people who'd endured hell with me, became the company's most cohesive unit. We had seen the worst and chosen to rebuild anyway. That creates a bond nothing can break. A year to the day after Richard had stormed into that conference room, pointing at me, I gathered my team. "I want to thank you," I said, looking at these people who had become more than colleagues. A year ago, we were almost destroyed by someone who believed power meant never being questioned. You could have left, found safer jobs. Instead, you stayed to repair what was broken. "We stayed because of you," Lucia said. "You showed us what real leadership looks like." That night, I sat alone in my office, no longer thinking of it as Richard's, and reflected on how completely my life had shifted. I'd never sought power or attention. I just wanted to do my job well and be treated with basic respect. Instead, I had been thrown into a crucible that burned away my fear of confrontation, my need for approval, my habit of shrinking myself. What emerged wasn't perfect or fearless, but stronger, more authentic. Richard had been right about one thing. It is always the quiet ones you need to watch. Not because we plot against you, but because we see everything. We notice patterns. We keep receipts. And when pushed too far, we don't just speak up. We transform. 2 years later, I was promoted to CFO. The day the announcement went public, I received an envelope with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping about my promotion and a single line written in familiar handwriting: "Congratulations, you won." I didn't respond. Some victories don't need acknowledgement. Sometimes living well really is the best revenge. Is my story unique? Maybe not. Corporate fraud happens every day. Whistleblowers face retaliation. Power corrupts. Systems protect themselves. What's unique is that I survived to tell it. That I found my voice when it mattered most. That I learned the difference between being quiet and being silenced. So if you're watching this and something in my story resonates, if you're the quiet one, the careful one, the observer, know this. Your attention to detail isn't overthinking. Your caution isn't weakness. Your documentation isn't paranoia. It might save you one day. And if you're the Richard in someone's story, the one who uses power to crush those beneath you, believing you're untouchable, know this too. The quiet ones are watching. Always watching. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand up to someone more powerful than you? What gave you the courage to speak up? Or if you stayed silent, what held you back? Share your story in the comments. And if this resonated, please subscribe. There's strength in shared experience, in knowing we're not alone when we're tested. Because ultimately, that's what my story is about. Not fraud, not corporate politics, not revenge. It's about the moment you decide who you really are. When everything is on the line, when the comfortable mask of who you've been is ripped away and you discover the person you've always been beneath it. Sometimes it takes nearly being destroyed to see how powerful you really are.